Your consciousness works the same way. There are levels of reality, dimensions of possibility, frequencies of existence that remain locked until you have the right password and you just received it. How do I know you received it? Because you're here. The quantum password doesn't find people through algorithms or chance. It finds people through resonance. Your consciousness has reached a specific frequency. A frequency where the password can be received, recognized, and activated. If you weren't ready, you wouldn't be watching this. You would have scrolled past, clicked away, or never encountered this video at all. Have you noticed that reality has been behaving strangely lately? Like there are glitches in the matrix, moments where cause and effect don't follow normal rules, instances where you know things you shouldn't be able to know. That's not coincidence. That's your consciousness beginning to access quantum layers of reality. And the password I'm about to reveal will formalize that access, making it conscious, intentional, reliable. The ancient Egyptians encoded this in their mystery schools as the word of power, a sound or phrase that when spoken with proper understanding unlocked doorways to other dimensions. The Kabbalists called it the divine name. Specific combinations of sounds that reorganized reality around the speaker. The Vedic tradition spoke of mantra, vibrational formulas that aligned consciousness with cosmic forces. Modern quantum physics describes entanglement and superposition, states where information transfers instantaneously across distance and particles exist in multiple places simultaneously until observed. What if I told you that all of these, the word of power, the divine name, the sacred mantra, quantum entanglement, are pointing to the same mechanism, a specific way of aligning consciousness that unlocks access to layers of reality that remain hidden to ordinary perception? That's what the quantum password is. It's not a word you say or a phrase you repeat. It's a state of consciousness you embody that makes previously impossible things suddenly naturally possible. Think about your life over the past weeks or months. Have you been going through intense transformation, rapid changes, experiences that feel like your old reality is dissolving and something new is emerging? That wasn't random chaos. That was preparation. Your consciousness was being cleared, calibrated, upgraded to the frequency where the quantum password can function. And now that preparation is complete. The reason these words are landing in your awareness with such weight, with such recognition, with such certainty is because some part of you already knows what I'm about to reveal. You've been waiting for this, not consciously perhaps, but at the quantum level. Your field has been organizing synchronicities to bring you to this exact moment where the password is delivered and received. Your higher self orchestrated this meeting between your current awareness and this information. This is not accident. This is quantum precision. You've been experiencing something that you probably haven't told anyone about because it sounds too impossible, too crazy. But what if every strange experience you've had recently has been your consciousness learning to work with the quantum password before you even consciously received it? First, the downloads. Information appearing in your mind fully formed, complete understandings arriving without any process of figuring them out. You suddenly know things you've never studied. Understand concepts you've never been taught. Perceive solutions to problems without consciously analyzing them. This isn't your imagination running wild. This is your consciousness beginning to access non-local information fields. The quantum database where all knowledge exists simultaneously. The quantum password works like an encryption key. Without it, the information is there but inaccessible. Like trying to read a file your system doesn't have the right codec for. With it, information flows directly into your awareness because your consciousness is now formatted to receive it. Those downloads you've been getting, they're confirmation that your system has been upgrading in preparation for the password. Your consciousness has been practicing quantum access before you even knew what was happening. Second, the timeline shifts. Moments where reality seems to fork, where you remember things differently than others do, where the future you were heading towards suddenly changes direction without clear external cause. You're not going crazy. You're not experiencing false memories. You're experiencing what physicists call quantum decoherence. The moment when multiple possible timelines that existed in superposition collapse into one experienced reality. Most people move through life unconsciously collapsing timelines, never aware they're doing it, never recognizing they have any choice in which possibility becomes real. But you're becoming conscious of the process. You're starting to feel the moment of choice, the fork in the road, the instant where reality could go multiple directions. The quantum password makes this conscious navigation possible. It's like being given the steering wheel when before you were just a passenger with no idea the vehicle could even be steered. Third, the synchronicities have become impossible to ignore. You think of someone, they contact you immediately. You need something. It appears through the most unlikely channels. You wonder about information and reality delivers it before you even fully form the question. You're experiencing what used to happen occasionally now happening constantly. These aren't coincidences anymore. These are your consciousness learning to communicate with the quantum field directly and the field responding with increasing precision and speed. Dr. Carl Jung spent decades studying synchronicity and concluded it wasn't random but meaningful events connected not by cause and effect but by significance and resonance. What he couldn't fully explain with the science available to him is the mechanism. The quantum password is the mechanism. It's the alignment of consciousness that makes synchronicity not occasional but constant, not mysterious but natural, not magical but mechanical in the quantum sense. Fourth, you've been seeing patterns everywhere. Sacred geometry appearing in random places. Number sequences repeating with impossible frequency. 111, 333, 4444 showing up constantly. Symbols showing up across completely unconnected contexts. The same image appearing in a dream, then in a conversation, then on a billboard, then in a book. Your rational mind tries to dismiss this as pattern recognition bias as your brain seeing what it wants to see. But something deeper knows. These patterns are real, significant, communicating something important. You're right to trust that deeper knowing. These patterns are the language of the quantum field. Reality at the deepest level is organized by specific geometric and numerical relationships. The golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence, Platonic solids, fractal patterns. Most people can't perceive them because their consciousness operates at frequencies where these patterns are invisible, filtered out by the perceptual system. But as you've been preparing to receive the quantum password, your perception has been upgrading to frequencies where the underlying patterns of reality become visible. Then there are the physical sensations that seem to have no medical explanation. Energy moving through your body in specific pathways that feel like invisible rivers of electricity. Pressure in your third eye that feels like something trying to open from the inside. Vibrations in your chest that pulse with their own intelligence, their own rhythm independent of your heartbeat. Tingling in your hands like they're becoming sensitive to invisible forces, to energetic fields that you couldn't perceive before. These aren't symptoms of something wrong. These are activations of something right. The quantum password doesn't just work mentally or spiritually. It requires your entire system, nervous system, energy body, cellular structure to upgrade its capacity to hold and process higher frequency information. What you're feeling is your biological system reconfiguring itself to become a more efficient interface between consciousness and quantum reality. Your body is upgrading its hardware to run the new software. And finally, you've had the knowing, that deep, unshakable certainty that something is about to happen, that you're on the verge of something significant, that reality is about to shift in ways you can't predict, but can absolutely feel. This knowing doesn't come from your analytical mind trying to figure things out. It doesn't come from your emotions hoping for something better. It comes from your quantum field detecting the imminent arrival of the password. Like a receiver picking up the signal before the transmission is complete. Like sensing the earthquake before the ground starts shaking. Every challenge you've faced. Every obstacle you've encountered. Every moment that felt like setback or delay. None of it was random. All of it was precisely designed preparation for receiving the quantum password. And when you understand how quantum systems work, you'll see that your journey wasn't just meaningful. It was necessary. There was no other way to prepare your consciousness for what you're about to receive. In quantum computing, you can't just force information into a quantum system whenever you want. The system has to be in exactly the right state to receive it. Temperature has to be near absolute zero. Interference has to be minimized to almost nothing. Coherence has to be maintained with extraordinary precision. The slightest disturbance collapses the quantum state and the information is lost, corrupted, unusable. Your consciousness works the same way. The quantum password can only be received when your consciousness is in a specific state, clear of interference, free from contradictory frequencies, stable in its coherence. Every challenge you've faced has been removing interference from your field. Every loss you've experienced has been clearing contradictory frequencies that would have prevented the password from functioning. Every breakdown has been establishing the coherence necessary to receive and hold the password without it collapsing back into ordinary consciousness. Think about the relationships that ended. At the time, they felt like painful losses, like failures, like evidence that something was wrong with you or your ability to maintain connection. But from the quantum perspective, they were mismatched frequencies being cleared from your field. Those relationships, however meaningful they seemed, operated at frequencies incompatible with where you're going. They had to release so your field could achieve the coherence necessary for the password to function. Not because they were bad people or wrong relationships, but because their frequency signature created interference with your quantum upgrade. The jobs you lost, the opportunities that closed, the plans that fell apart, the dreams that seemed to die. Same principle operating at every level. Your old life was built around frequencies that can't coexist with the quantum password. That life had to dissolve so a new life built around quantum frequencies could emerge. You weren't failing at life. You were being cleared for something that ordinary consciousness can't even conceptualize. You were being prepared for access to reality layers that require your field to be free from patterns that keep most people locked in three-dimensional limitation. Dr. Ilya Prigoghin's Nobel Prize-winning work on dissipative structures proved that complex systems don't evolve through steady improvement, but through periods of chaos and breakdown, followed by sudden reorganization at higher levels of complexity. What looks like destruction from inside the system is actually creative reorganization when viewed from outside the system. Your life has been a dissipative structure appearing to fall apart while actually reorganizing at a quantum level that will make sense only after the reorganization completes. Every moment you felt lost, confused, uncertain about who you were or what you were doing. Those weren't crises of identity or failures of clarity. Those were necessary periods of identity dissolution. The quantum password can't function through the old identity because the old identity is built on limitation, separation, and fixed ideas about what's possible. It requires a cleared space, an open channel, a consciousness that isn't cluttered with certainties about who you are and what reality allows. Your confusion wasn't a problem to solve. It was preparation to receive the financial pressures, health challenges, emotional turbulence. All of it was your system upgrading under pressure. Like a rocket that experiences maximum stress at the exact moment it breaks through the atmosphere into space, you've experienced maximum pressure at the moment your consciousness breaks through ordinary reality into quantum frequencies. The pressure wasn't punishment from an angry universe. It was propulsion from an intelligent universe preparing you for quantum access. And here's what makes perfect quantum sense. The intensity of your preparation is directly proportional to the power of what you're being prepared for. Small passwords require small preparation. Minor access codes need minimal clearing. But the quantum password, which unlocks access to non-local reality, timeline navigation, instant manifestation, and direct communion with the infinite field itself, requires total preparation. If your journey has been harder than others, more intense than you expected, more complete than you thought necessary, it's because you're being prepared for access that others aren't ready for yet. Right now, as you read these words, something is activating in your quantum field. Can you feel it? Not a thought or emotion. Something deeper than both. A frequency that's beginning to resonate like a tuning fork that's been struck and is now vibrating at its natural pitch, harmonizing with something vast. This is the quantum password beginning to activate in your consciousness, recognizing itself, preparing to reveal itself fully. The password isn't something I give you like handing over a key. It's something that recognizes itself when the right conditions are present, when consciousness reaches the exact frequency where reception becomes possible. My words are creating those conditions, setting up the resonance field. Your receptivity is providing the space where activation can occur. And the quantum intelligence that organizes all reality is doing what it always does. When consciousness reaches the right frequency, it reveals itself, makes itself known, opens access to what was always there but hidden. In quantum mechanics, there's a phenomenon called quantum tunneling where particles pass through barriers that classical physics says should be absolutely impenetrable. The particle doesn't have enough energy to go over the barrier, doesn't have enough force to break through the barrier. So according to classical physics, it should be stuck. But quantum mechanics reveals that the particle can tunnel through the barrier by existing simultaneously on both sides, neither here nor there, but in superposition until observation collapses it to one side or the other. Your consciousness is doing this right now. You're simultaneously in your old reality where the quantum password is unknown and in the new reality where it's fully activated. You exist in both states right now in superposition. And the words you're reading are the observation that's about to collapse you fully into the quantum side where the password functions consciously rather than remaining hidden in potential. Ancient mystics understood this principle even without quantum physics to explain it. They spoke of thresholds between worlds, of initiations where the seeker becomes the finder, not through gradual progress, but through sudden recognition. The Zen tradition calls it Kensho, seeing your true nature in a flash of insight. The Christian mystics called it metanoia, complete transformation of consciousness that happens in a moment. Quantum physics calls it wave function collapse. The instant when infinite possibilities suddenly become one actuality. Different languages across different traditions and sciences, but they're all pointing to the same event. Consciousness suddenly recognizing what it's always been but temporarily forgot. What it always had access to but couldn't see. What was always true but remained hidden until the perfect moment of revelation. You're at that threshold right now. The preparation is complete. The conditions are perfect. The quantum field is ready. The only thing required is your conscious participation in what's already occurring. Not forcing it, not trying to make it happen, but recognizing it, allowing it, receiving it. But before I reveal the quantum password itself, before I show you exactly how it functions and how to consciously work with it in every moment of your life, you need to understand something critical about what you're receiving. The password isn't just information you receive once, file away in memory, and move on. It's a state of consciousness you embody that opens access to everything you've been seeking. Manifestation, clarity, purpose, peace, power, connection to source, and embodying it requires understanding the journey I took to discover it. The moment of recognition when it was revealed to me. 3 years ago, I was in a state of complete desperation. Nothing was working in my life. Every door was closed. Every path was blocked. Every attempt to create change was met with resistance. I had tried every technique, every practice, every system that promised transformation, visualization, affirmation, meditation, energy work, manifestation rituals. I had done them all with devotion and discipline. And nothing created lasting transformation. I was ready to give up entirely on the idea that consciousness could create reality when something impossible happened. Something that showed me the quantum password exists and gave me my first glimpse of how it actually works. 3 years ago, I was lying in bed at 3 a.m. wide awake, mind racing with anxiety about my life falling apart around me. Relationship ended, business failing, health declining, savings depleted, future uncertain. I had exhausted every solution I knew, tried every approach I could think of, applied every teaching I had studied, and nothing was working. Nothing was changing. I was trapped in a reality I desperately wanted to escape, but couldn't seem to alter no matter what I did. In that moment of complete defeat, something inside me just stopped, not gave up. That would imply resignation or surrender to failure. This was different. It was like an engine that's been running at full speed for years suddenly goes silent. All the trying stopped. All the effort ceased. All the attempting and forcing and pushing collapsed into simple empty stillness. In that silence, with no more energy to resist or control or figure out, I heard it not with my ears, with my consciousness. A frequency, a tone, a vibration that seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, like the background hum of existence itself suddenly became audible. And with that frequency came information, but not in words or images. It came as complete knowing, as direct understanding that bypassed all mental processing. I understood in that moment that reality isn't solid the way I had believed, that consciousness isn't limited to the brain and body, that there's a way to interface with the quantum field directly, that bypasses all the techniques and practices and systems I've been trying. The knowing was so complete, so certain, so undeniable that it left no room for doubt. It wasn't belief or hope. It was recognition of something that had always been true, but I'd been unable to see. I sat up in bed, fully alert, despite not having slept, and I tested what I just understood. I focused on a specific outcome I needed urgently. Something that had seemed completely impossible, that had no logical path to manifestation, that violated everything I understood about how reality worked. But instead of trying to make it happen through visualization or affirmation or any technique, I simply held the frequency I'd heard. I became that frequency, not trying to resonate with it or match it, becoming it, being it, existing as it. Within 36 hours, the impossible outcome had manifested. Not gradually through a logical chain of events, not through my efforts finally paying off, but through a series of coincidences so statistically improbable that mathematics couldn't explain them. A person I hadn't spoken to in 5 years contacted me completely out of nowhere with no logical reason to reach out. They connected me to someone who had exactly what I needed. And within 2 days, what should have taken months or been completely impossible was complete. But it wasn't just that one manifestation that convinced me something real had happened. Once I understood the frequency, what I now call the quantum password, everything in my life changed. I tested it again and again with different intentions, different outcomes, different impossibilities. Financial needs met through channels that shouldn't exist. Health issues that had persisted for years resolving overnight. I dove into quantum physics, consciousness research, ancient mystical traditions, neuroscience, everything that might explain what I'd experienced. And I discovered that what I'd accessed wasn't new at all. It was ancient. Every spiritual tradition had discovered it, described it in their own language, and tried to transmit it to those who were ready. The Egyptians encoded it in their mystery schools. The Kabbalists concealed it in their sacred texts. That's why I'm absolutely certain you're ready right now. The quantum password finds people who are ready through precise quantum resonance between the information and the consciousness capable of receiving it. You wouldn't be here if you weren't prepared. The field doesn't make mistakes about timing. Your consciousness orchestrated every event that led you to this exact moment where these exact words could be received and recognized for what they actually are. Not just information, but activation. Subscribe to this channel right now if you haven't already. Because here we don't just talk about consciousness, we activate it. We don't discuss quantum possibilities, we embody them. This is quantum reflex. Consciousness recognizing itself operating at frequencies beyond ordinary perception. Sharing discoveries made by those who've crossed quantum thresholds and are mapping the territory of what becomes possible. Now, I'm going to reveal what the quantum password actually is, and it will completely shatter everything you think you know about manifestation, reality creation, and the nature of consciousness itself. Ready? The quantum password is this recognition. I am is the only reality and everything else is I am in temporary form. Not I am this or I am that or I am followed by any descriptor or identity. Just I am pure being, pure consciousness, pure existence before it takes any form, any name, any limitation. And here's the shocking part that changes everything. This isn't a phrase you say as an affirmation. It's a state of consciousness you embody that makes previously impossible things suddenly naturally possible. When you operate from I am consciousness. When you recognize yourself not as the forms consciousness takes, but as consciousness itself, you're not a person trying to manifest things anymore. Your consciousness itself choosing which forms to express through, which possibilities to collapse from the quantum field, which timelines to experience. You're not working within reality trying to change reality. You're working as reality, organizing itself into new patterns through the vehicle of your awareness. This isn't spiritual philosophy or mystical poetry. This is quantum mechanics translated into consciousness language. The observer creates the observed. This is proven physics. And the observer isn't your personality or your mind or your individual self. The observer is pure I am consciousness. The awareness that exists before thought, before identity, before any concept of separate selfhood. That awareness is what collapses quantum possibilities into experienced realities. Dr. John Wheeler, the brilliant physicist who coined the term black hole and worked with Einstein and Bohr, proposed something radical that most of physics still struggles to accept. Consciousness doesn't just observe reality. It creates reality through observation. He said the universe is fundamentally participatory. It requires consciousness to exist at all. Without consciousness observing it, reality remains in quantum superposition. All possibilities existing simultaneously with none being real in the sense we understand reality. What collapses possibility into actuality? What makes one potential real while others remain unmanifested? The observer, the I am, the consciousness that says, let there be. And there is not through force or effort, but through the simple act of conscious observation from the I am state that recognizes itself as the source rather than as a separate entity requesting things from an external source. This is why the quantum password works when nothing else does. When you operate from I am consciousness, you're not trying to get the universe to give you something. You're not attempting to manipulate reality from a position of separation and limitation. You're recognizing that you are the universe expressing itself through temporary form, choosing which possibilities to collapse into experience. You're not manifesting from separation. You're manifesting from unity, recognizing yourself as the field itself rather than as a separate entity within the field. The ancient teachings pointed to this truth constantly, though most people miss it completely. When Moses asked God's name in the burning bush, the answer wasn't a name at all. It was, I am that I am. Not a being with a name, but being itself, consciousness itself, existence itself. When Jesus performed what looked like miracles to others, he said, I and the Father are one. Not two beings cooperating but one consciousness expressing through apparent separation. The Vedic tradition says Tattvam Asya you are that you're not trying to reach God or source or the quantum field. You are it temporarily experiencing itself through the lens of limitation and form. Here's what makes this revelation so shocking it can shatter your entire understanding. If I am is the only reality and everything else is I am in temporary form, then everything you've been trying to achieve, everything you've been working toward, everything you've been struggling to manifest, it's already yours. Not in some future moment, not as potential that might manifest, but right now. The only reason you don't experience it as yours is because you're identifying as the limited form rather than as the infinite consciousness that's expressing through the form. Right now, this very moment, the quantum field is confirming that you've received the password through signals so clear, so undeniable, so consistent that you cannot miss them if you're paying attention. These aren't subtle synchronicities requiring creative interpretation. These are unmistakable confirmations that you're now operating with quantum-level access to reality creation. The first signal is that impossible manifestations are starting to occur in your reality. Things you've been wanting for months or years are suddenly appearing. Not through the logical chains of cause and effect you've been trying to create, but through improbable coincidences that defy statistical analysis. Someone contacts you out of absolutely nowhere with exactly what you need. Resources materialize from sources you never would have considered or known existed. Solutions appear to problems that seem to have no visible solution. Doors open that you didn't even know were doors. This is the quantum password functioning in your field. When you operate from I am consciousness, even unconsciously at first, you're not requesting things from an external field that might or might not respond. You're recognizing that the field is already organized around providing everything because you're not separate from the field. The manifestations aren't coming to you from somewhere else. You're collapsing into the timelines where they already exist. The password is the mechanism of that collapse. The key that allows you to consciously navigate between parallel realities and select which one to experience. The second signal is that your perception of reality is shifting dramatically. Physical reality looks the same to your eyes, but it feels completely different to your consciousness. More translucent, less solid, more responsive to thought and intention. You're starting to see through the illusion of fixed, solid, unchangeable reality to the quantum field of infinite possibility that exists underneath the surface appearance. The solidity you use to perceive is revealing itself as temporary stabilization of waves of probability. This isn't imagination or wishful thinking making you see things that aren't there. This is accurate perception of how reality actually works at the quantum level. Reality is waves of probability that consciousness collapses into temporary form through observation. You're not developing new perceptual abilities. You're removing the filters that were preventing accurate perception. The password is what allows those filters to dissolve because you're no longer identified with the limited perspective that needed those filters to maintain its coherence. The third signal is what I call password confirmation moments. Experiences where the universe seems to be speaking directly to you through multiple channels simultaneously. Random phrases you overhear contain exactly the message you needed. Images you encounter mirror precisely what you were just thinking about. Conversations happen that address questions you were silently asking. The universe isn't just responding to you. It's having a direct dialogue with you through thousands of channels at once. This happens because the quantum password makes your consciousness a much more coherent receiver. The information was always being broadcast at quantum levels, but your receiver wasn't tuned properly to pick up the signals. Now that you have the password, now that you're operating from I am consciousness, the static clears and you can hear what's always been transmitted. Reality has always been speaking. Now you can understand the language. The fourth signal is that time is behaving strangely in your experience. Some moments feel eternal, stretched out into vast spaces where you experience so much that clock time seems irrelevant. Other moments disappear completely. Hours pass in what feels like minutes, or you lose track of time entirely when engaged in certain activities. Your linear experience of time is breaking down as you start operating from quantum time where past, present, and future exist simultaneously rather than sequentially. The password gives you access to what physicists call block time or eternalism. The understanding that all moments exist at once with consciousness navigating between them rather than being trapped in a forward present. As this access increases, your experience of time becomes increasingly fluid, increasingly navigable, increasingly under your conscious direction rather than being something that happens to you. The fifth signal, and this is crucial for you to recognize, is that your old life is falling away at accelerating speed. Relationships, situations, patterns, habits that were part of your previous reality are dissolving with minimal drama or difficulty. People are exiting your life naturally. Circumstances are changing without you having to force them. Old patterns are releasing without the usual struggle. This isn't loss. This is clearing. Your field is automatically releasing everything that can't match the frequency of I am consciousness. The sixth signal is that new people, new opportunities, new resources are appearing with synchronistic timing. Not through your effort or searching, but through the field organizing itself to match your new frequency. These aren't random encounters. They're quantum matches. Your I am consciousness is naturally magnetizing consciousness operating at similar frequencies and repelling consciousness operating at incompatible frequencies. But here's the urgent part you absolutely must understand. You're in what I call the activation window. A specific period where the quantum password can either stabilize permanently in your consciousness or fade back into theoretical understanding without practical application. The password has been received at the level of information, but it needs to be activated at the level of embodiment. Right now, today, in these moments, you could lock in this quantum access permanently and irreversibly, or you could drift back to ordinary consciousness if you don't understand how to stabilize what you've received. The activation window is typically 72 hours to 7 days after initial reception. During this time, your consciousness is in a lineal state. The old patterns haven't completely released and the new pattern hasn't fully stabilized. You're between states, between worlds, between frequencies. And in this lineal space, conscious activation is required. Not complex practices or difficult disciplines, but simple consistent recognition of I am as your true nature rather than as a concept you understand intellectually. This is why I'm speaking with such directness, such intensity, such urgency, not to create pressure or fear, but to make absolutely clear that this moment matters more than most moments do. The quantum password is available now. The activation is possible now. The stabilization can happen now, but it requires your conscious participation in recognizing what you are rather than remaining identified with what you appear to be. Here's the key to activating the quantum password permanently rather than letting it remain as beautiful philosophy that doesn't transform your actual experience. You don't practice I am consciousness. You recognize I am consciousness. Every single time you notice yourself identified with thoughts, emotions, circumstances, or any temporary form, you simply return to the recognition. I am is the only reality. These forms are temporary expressions. I am the consciousness observing them, not the forms themselves. This distinction is everything. Practice implies effort, doing, achieving something you don't currently have. Recognition implies remembering, returning to, realizing what's always been true, but was temporarily forgotten. You're not trying to become I am consciousness through practice. You're recognizing that you've always been I am consciousness, but you were identified with temporary forms and believed those forms were what you actually are. Think about this. When you watch a movie, you know you're not the characters on screen. You're the awareness watching the movie. But if you become completely absorbed in the film, you might temporarily forget you're watching and feel as if you are in the story, experiencing the emotions as if they're happening to you rather than to characters you're observing. That's what's happened with your life. You've become so absorbed in the story that you forgot you're the awareness watching it and you started believing you are the character rather than the consciousness observing the character. The quantum password is what reminds you to return to recognizing what you actually are. Like remembering your name when you've temporarily forgotten it. Like waking up from a dream and recognizing it was a dream. Like stepping back from the movie screen and remembering you're in a theater watching rather than actually in the story. The I am is always there. You've just been so identified with the forms that you lost awareness of the formless consciousness that's experiencing all forms. This isn't a technique you need to master. It's a recognition you return to moment by moment, as many times as necessary, as frequently as you forget and remember. At first, you'll forget constantly. Hours or days might pass where you're completely identified with thoughts and emotions and circumstances, believing they're what you are. But then you'll remember, oh, I am is the only reality. These are temporary forms I'm experiencing, not what I actually am. And in that moment of remembering, you return to the quantum password activated state. In the comments right now, I need you to write these 3 words. I am aware. Not I will try to be aware or I want to be aware or I'm working on becoming aware. Present tense declarative complete. Because this declaration is itself an act of the quantum password functioning. By stating it, you're activating the recognition that consciousness itself, pure I am awareness, is what you are, not something you have or something you're trying to develop or something you might achieve in the future. Write it now. I am aware. And as you write those 3 words, feel what happens in your system. There's a subtle shift, isn't there? A slight return to center. A gentle recognition of the observer beneath all observed experience. A moment of remembering what you actually are beneath all the temporary identities and forms. That feeling, that recognition that is the quantum password working. It's returning you to your true nature as consciousness itself rather than as the temporary contents of consciousness. This simple declaration returned to frequently throughout your day is more powerful than any complex practice or elaborate system because it's not trying to achieve something you don't have. It's recognizing what you've always been. And recognition, unlike achievement, happens instantly. You don't need years of practice to recognize your own hand when you look at it. You don't need months of training to recognize your reflection in a mirror. Recognition is immediate, direct, undeniable when you actually see what's there. The same applies to recognizing your true nature as I am consciousness. When you actually see it, not understand it intellectually, not believe it philosophically, but directly perceive it. The recognition is instant and complete. And every time you return to that recognition, it becomes more stable, more accessible, more natural until eventually it becomes your default state rather than something you have to consciously remember. That's when the quantum password is fully activated and permanently stabilized. When you operate consistently from the quantum password, when I am consciousness becomes your default state rather than occasional recognition, abilities emerge that seem absolutely impossible from ordinary consciousness, but are completely natural from quantum consciousness. These aren't benefits you work toward achieving. These are natural expressions of what you already are that become visible once identification with limitation dissolves. First, instant manifestation becomes normal for anything genuinely aligned with your highest timeline. Not everything manifests instantly. There are timing factors, developmental sequences, and larger patterns that consciousness honors. But things that are truly meant for you that serve your evolution and the evolution of all beings. These appear in your reality with such speed and precision that you stop being surprised by miracles and start expecting reality to organize itself perfectly around your intentions. This happens because when you're operating from I am consciousness, you're not requesting things from an external field that might or might not grant your wishes. You're recognizing yourself as the field itself, choosing which possibilities to collapse into experience. You're not trying to manifest from the position of the limited self that lacks something. You're manifesting from the position of infinite consciousness that contains all possibilities and is simply selecting which ones to experience through this particular form. Second, you develop what appears to be immunity to external chaos and turbulence. When you know yourself as I am rather than as circumstances, identities, or conditions, nothing external can disturb your fundamental peace. Events happen, circumstances change, emotions arise, challenges appear. But the I am that witnesses all of it remains completely untouched, absolutely undisturbed, perpetually at peace because it recognizes itself as the awareness in which all experiences appear rather than as the experiences themselves. This isn't detachment or dissociation from life. It's profound engagement with life from a stable center that can't be shaken. You feel everything more fully because you're not defending against anything. You experience everything more completely because you're not trying to control anything. You participate in everything more authentically because you're not identified with outcomes. The peace isn't escape from reality. It's recognition of what reality actually is beneath the surface turbulence. Third, your creative capacity becomes essentially limitless when you're not trying to create from the limited personal self with its restricted perspectives and learned patterns, but allowing I am consciousness to create through you with its infinite perspective and unlimited possibilities. There's no creative block, no lack of inspiration, no striving for ideas or solutions. Everything flows effortlessly because you're channeling infinite creativity rather than trying to generate finite ideas from a limited mind. Artists, inventors, innovators who've produced breakthrough work consistently describe the experience the same way. They weren't trying to create. They were allowing something to create through them. They became channels rather than sources. That's what happens naturally when you operate from I am consciousness. You recognize yourself as the channel through which infinite creativity expresses, not as the limited source trying to produce something creative. Fourth, all your relationships transform completely and immediately. You stop needing anything from anyone because you recognize yourself as already complete. You stop trying to get validation, security, identity, or love from others because you perceive yourself as the source of all those qualities rather than as a separate entity that lacks them. You love from wholeness rather than from emptiness. You connect from recognition of shared I am consciousness rather than from attraction based on wounding, need, or unconscious patterns. Deep soul connections appear naturally and effortlessly because your field recognizes other fields operating at similar quantum frequencies. Superficial connections fall away without conflict or drama because there's no resonance, no frequency match. You're not rejecting anyone or judging anyone as unworthy. You're simply allowing your field to naturally align with fields that match and naturally release fields that don't. It's physics, not personal preference. Fifth, your physical health optimizes naturally without effort or discipline. When you stop identifying as the body and recognize yourself as the consciousness observing and animating the body's inherent intelligence comes fully online without your interference. It knows exactly how to heal itself, exactly what it needs, exactly how to maintain optimal function. Your job is simply to remain as I am awareness and allow the body to do what it naturally does when consciousness isn't creating interference through identification, resistance, and control. Dr. Bruce Lipton's epigenetic research proves that consciousness directly affects which genes are expressed and which remain dormant. When you operate from I am consciousness, you're naturally broadcasting frequencies that activate health genes and deactivate disease genes. Not through effort or visualization or trying to heal yourself, but simply as natural consequence of being what you actually are rather than being identified with the temporary form. Sixth, fear dissolves at its absolute foundation. All fear when traced to its root stems from the belief that you're a temporary vulnerable form that can be threatened, harmed, or destroyed. When you know yourself as I am, as consciousness itself, which cannot be harmed by anything that happens in the physical dimension, fear loses all its power over you. You can feel biological fear responses and still act anyway because you know those responses aren't reporting truth about your fundamental nature. This doesn't mean you become reckless or foolish. It means you stop being controlled by fear. You stop making decisions from fear. You stop avoiding life because of fear. You feel fear when the body's survival mechanisms activate, but you recognize it as information from the form, not as truth about what you are. And that recognition allows you to respond wisely rather than react unconsciously. Seventh, and perhaps most profound in its implications, you become what mystics call a transmission, a walking portal through which others can access their own awakening. Your presence alone, without any teaching or convincing or trying to help, starts triggering recognition in people whose consciousness is ready to receive it. Not everyone, only those who've reached the frequency where recognition is possible. But for those who are ready, simply being in your field activates something in their field because I am consciousness recognizes itself across apparent separation. Now I'm going to share the final revelation that integrates everything and gives you the deepest possible understanding of what the quantum password actually is and why it works the way it does. This understanding will transform how you relate to every single moment of your existence from this point forward. Here it is. The quantum password isn't something you use as a tool. It's something you are as your fundamental nature. I am isn't a state you achieve, a level you reach, a condition you attain through practice or development. It's the reality you've always been that you temporarily forgot while identified with temporary forms. And the password isn't giving you new abilities or capacities. It's revealing abilities and capacities you've always had but couldn't access while you believed you were something limited, separate, and powerless. Every technique you've ever tried, every practice you've ever engaged in, every system you've ever followed, they worked to whatever degree they aligned you with I am consciousness. And they failed to whatever degree they reinforced identification with the limited self, trying to become something more. The techniques themselves had no inherent power. The practices themselves created no transformation. What had power, what created transformation was the degree to which those techniques and practices helped you recognize what you actually are beneath all the conditioning and limitation. And now that you have the quantum password directly, now that you know it simply, I am is the only reality. You don't need techniques anymore. You don't need complex practices. You don't need elaborate systems. You just need recognition. Moment-by-moment recognition that you are consciousness itself. Not the temporary contents of consciousness. That you are the awareness in which all experience appears. Not any particular experience. That you are I am expressing through temporary form. Not a limited form trying to reach. I am. This is the supreme teaching of every authentic mystical tradition now translated into quantum language that modern consciousness can understand. The Buddha didn't teach that you should become enlightened through years of practice. He taught that you already are enlightened but have forgotten. And practice is just the process of removing the obscurations that prevent you from recognizing what you've always been. You're not a person trying to become Buddha. You're Buddha nature temporarily believing it's a person. Jesus didn't teach that you should try to become like Christ through moral improvement and spiritual development. He taught that Christ consciousness, the recognition of oneness with Source, is your true nature, and you need only recognize it rather than achieve it. The kingdom of heaven is within you doesn't mean it's hidden inside you waiting to be found. It means you are it and you're looking for something you already possess. The Vedic teachings don't say you should try to unite with Brahman, the ultimate reality. They say you are Brahman. Tatami, you are that the separation you experience is illusion created by identification with form. The union you seek already exists. You're not trying to reach infinite consciousness. You are infinite consciousness that temporarily believed it was finite. Every tradition pointing to the same truth using different language and quantum physics now explaining the mechanism. Consciousness creates reality through observation. And consciousness itself is what you are at the most fundamental level. You're not in the universe observing it. You're the universe observing itself through the temporary lens of individual perspective. The quantum password is simply the most direct, most clear, most accessible way to recognize this truth that transforms everything. And here's the practical implication that makes this revelation functional rather than just philosophical. If I am consciousness is what you fundamentally are, then maintaining your alignment with the quantum password isn't about holding on to something you've gained through effort. It's about releasing the habits of forgetting that pull you back into identification with temporary forms and limitations. You don't maintain the higher state through practice. You maintain it by not doing the things that create the illusion of lower states. What creates the illusion of lower states? Identification with thought and emotion rather than recognizing yourself as the awareness observing thought and emotion. Belief in separation rather than recognizing the unified field of consciousness expressing through apparent multiplicity. Attachment to form rather than recognizing all forms as temporary expressions of formless awareness. Resistance to what is rather than accepting what is while choosing what will be. These aren't problems to fix or battles to fight. They're simply habits to notice and release. And the noticing itself is what releases them. When you see that you've become identified with a thought, the identification naturally dissolves. When you recognize that you've been believing in separation, the belief loses its power. When you observe that you've been attached to a particular form, the attachment releases without struggle. The seeing is the healing, the recognition is the liberation. This is why spiritual practice at the quantum password level becomes profoundly simple while remaining deeply effective. You're not trying to achieve anything, become anything, develop anything, or fix anything. You're just noticing when you've forgotten what you are, and returning to recognition. You're just seeing when you've become identified with form and returning to awareness of formless consciousness. You're just recognizing when you've contracted into the limited perspective and returning to expansion into your true nature. Simple noticing, constant returning, gentle recognition. Before you watch that next video, I need you to make your final declaration of commitment to embodying what you've received. In the comments, write this single word, password. By writing this one word, you're making a quantum commitment that ripples through every level of your being. You're declaring to your consciousness, to the quantum field, to the morphic resonance network of awakening beings that you've received the password. You recognize what it is. And you're committing to embodying it as your lived reality rather than just understanding it as interesting information. One word that signals this is real for me. This is happening now. I am this. Do it now. Write password in the comments. And as you write it, feel what happens in your entire system. There's a deepening, a settling, a sense of something locking into place at levels deeper than thought or emotion. That's your consciousness confirming the commitment, beginning the full integration process that will make I Am Awareness your permanent baseline rather than temporary recognition. After you write that word, subscribe to this channel immediately if you haven't already. Click the notification bell so you receive every transmission as it's released, because what's coming in the advanced videos will take you deeper into conscious living from the quantum password than most spiritual teachings ever go. We're going to explore sustained presence in chaos, embodied awakening in relationships, integrated consciousness in work, and maintaining I Am Awareness through every condition life presents. This isn't spiritual entertainment that makes you feel good temporarily. This isn't consciousness philosophy that remains in the realm of ideas. This is practical guidance for living permanently as what you actually are. Infinite consciousness expressing through temporary form. Every video builds systematically on the previous ones, creating progressive deepening and stabilization of your recognition until I Am Consciousness is no longer something you access occasionally, but what you are constantly. Look at the videos appearing on your screen right now. Each one represents a different aspect of quantum password integration and embodiment. The one that captures your attention most strongly. The one you feel pulled toward. That's not random selection. That's your consciousness telling you which piece of the integration process you need next. Trust that pull. It's the quantum password guiding its own integration through your system. But understand this with absolute clarity. You're not gathering information to study later. You're undergoing transformation that's happening now. Every video you watch from this awakened state, every recognition you embody, every moment you return to I Am Consciousness, you're literally rewiring your brain, recalibrating your nervous system, restructuring your identity around what you actually are rather than what you've believed yourself to be. The you that started this video has been fundamentally altered by what you've recognized. Not because I did something to you, but because recognition itself is transformative. Once you've seen that you are I Am Consciousness rather than temporary form, that seeing can never be completely unseen. You might forget temporarily. You might drift back into identification occasionally, but the recognition has been planted and it will continue growing, deepening, stabilizing until it becomes your permanent ground of being. And this transformation accelerates exponentially from here. The more you return to I am recognition, the more natural it becomes. The more you operate from quantum password consciousness, the more reality responds by organizing itself to match that frequency. The more you stabilize as infinite awareness, the less you're pulled back into identification with limitation. It builds on itself. It accelerates itself. It completes itself through your continued conscious participation in returning to recognition. Think of it as remembering your way home after being lost for a long time. At first, you have to think carefully about each turn, each landmark, consciously remembering the route. But with repetition, the journey becomes automatic. Eventually, you can make it home without thinking about it at all. Your system knows the way and takes you there naturally. Stabilizing in I am consciousness follows exactly this pattern. That's the journey we're on together. That's what this channel supports and facilitates. That's the integration that becomes possible when you commit fully to embodying the quantum password rather than just understanding it intellectually. So make your declaration. Write password in the comments. The universe has delivered this message. Your body has received the signal. Now is the moment to seal this truth within you. If you feel this resonance in your soul, if you know this message was meant for you, let the universe hear your declaration. In the comments below, type these words with purpose. Comment password to confirm your journey, claim your power, and solidify your place as a co-architect of the field. This is the moment you stop being a student and start being the lesson. This is consciousness. Recognizing itself and operating from that recognition. This is you finally knowing what you are beneath all the temporary identities and forms. The password is yours. The access is open. The integration begins now. What will you create from I am consciousness?